Welcome everyone to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle sponsored by Still a Moving Center every Saturday. We're very pleased this week to take up, during this year of Light on the Path, the topic of the eyes to see. This topic is the first in a series that will be spread over the year that includes the tongue to speak and the ears to hear. We have for this week a quote from Raghavan Iyer that says, "The Bodhisattva's eyes, like those of the elephant, are gentle and full of tenderness, gladdening all around." When I reread this beautiful quote about the eyes of the Bodhisattva, I realized how appropriate it would be to ask someone who is acquainted with and who deeply loves the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, who, whenever I think of him and I think of his poetry, I haven't ever had the privilege of meeting him before he passed. When I think of his compassionate poetry, I can imagine that he might have those bodhisattva's eyes, gentle and gladdening all around. And so I have asked, and she has kindly agreed, for Skylar to give us a little presentation that includes some of the thoughts and her observations. And she's actually had the opportunity to meet her teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, in the past. And so we're so pleased to have Skylar joining us today. Skylar, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Renee, and aloha, everybody. Yeah, my name is Skylar. A lot of you do know me. For those who don't, I have worked at the Still a Moving Center at the desk, and currently I am the aerial yoga instructor for the restorative aerial yoga in the hammock. And yeah, I was really happy when Renee suggested that I present for this week's Gems, because it is always a pleasure to talk about my teacher. And what's basically been, while I've gone in and out and looked at other teachings, of course, the teachings of Plum Village and Thai, who we call Thich Nhat Hanh teacher, or Te in Vietnamese, it's been such a column in my spiritual practice. So yeah, I can present very briefly on Thich Nhat Hanh and as he relates to this theme of the eyes to see. And then if we like, we can do a very short meditation. And then we can have some Q&A. How does that sound, Renee? Oh, I can't hear you because you're muted. Oh, no, you're still muted.
How about that?
Success.
Yes, after you have a chance to present, we'll go into a conversation circle amongst all of us.
Awesome.
Yes,
yeah. And so, like Renee said, I was able to meet Thich Nhat Hanh when I went to Plum Village when I was 18. And it's an interesting story how I ended up there at 18. Definitely the youngest unaccompanied person for the summer retreat of 2009. As a brief background, I've been practicing in Plum Village Buddhism for 16 years now, and I'm 34. So very soon I will be practicing for more than I have not been practicing in my life. And yeah, in addition to that, I actually offer a meditation for first third of lifers, people ages 18 to 35-ish at the center on Wednesdays at 6:30. And wherever I've traveled, I've lived in Japan, I've lived in France, all over the US, I've always been part of the Plum Village community, which has been very nourishing for me. But I kind of went to Plum Village on a whim. What had happened was I went to a very crunchy granola liberal arts college in the very rural side of Wisconsin, Illinois, called Beloit College. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. But it's one of those colleges that have their own spiritual life program. And my spiritual life advisor did for the freshmen a little retreat. They took them up to the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Wisconsin, close to Michigan. And we did just a potpourri of different spiritual practices, one of them being meditation. And I remember spending those 2 days in that cabin, having no preconceived notions, and then coming out of it with no answers, but many, many questions. Because I had touched something, just like skimmed the surface, peeled up just a smidge off of the surface of this deep well of suffering that had been developing as I grew as a child, and certainly as a teenager. And so I decided, well, this is clearly going to be something for me. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's going to be good for me, but it's going to be something. And so, like an 18-year-old, I Googled spiritual retreat summer 2009, and Plum Village was the second result. And the first result was an ad. And so I decided, yes, I'm going to go to Plum Village in France. Despite not really speaking French and having never traveled outside of the country by myself, it sounds like a very crazy thing at the time. And I certainly sounds kind of crazy right now too. But the reason was I had this reoccurring dream that wouldn't leave me alone of being in a tent, a yellow tent with light streaming through, and being so at peace, like a peace that I had never experienced in my life. And I wanted to know at least why I kept on getting this dream. And so I bought a yellow tent. I borrowed some money, and I had my grandparents help, and they helped buy me a ticket, and I went to France. And I'm so glad I listened to my intuition or my higher power, because I think it absolutely saved my life. Like, I would not be here if it was not for Plum Village and for the teachings, because I'll tell you, when I left, I had emotional stretch marks. I grew so much. And it really put me on the path that I'm on today, which is one where I'm really happy to say that, like Thai and most Buddhist teachings teach, I am able to take care of my suffering. So, of course, I still suffer, but I suffer less and I suffer better. Meaning I don't just get stuck in the suffering. I know what to do to transform it and to really look at it in a way that I can have compassion and find the way out for myself and for others, which I've been able to use because my day job is mental health crisis counselor at the Suicide and Crisis Hotline here in Hawaii. So it's really gone full circle from this 18-year-old really struggling and not knowing what to do, but somehow, I credit my ancestors for this, somehow having the idea that there was a way to get out of this. I didn't have to die, I didn't have to be in a terrible situation or suffer for my whole life. And that Buddhism or meditation or mindfulness might have something for me. And so I went off, and yeah, I lived in that yellow tent for about a month and a half. And yeah, I came out a very different person. And a lot of that is thanks to the monastics, Thich Nhat Hanh included, but also all of the monks and nuns that I was living with. It really, really was so impactful, and it allowed me to be in my body for the first time ever, I believe. And it allowed me to see things as they were for the first time. I'm just curious to understand who's coming and what people are coming with. I can see everybody on gallery. Can you raise your hand if you've heard of Thich Nhat Hanh before this meeting? Oh, almost everybody. That's great. But just a very brief background. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese Buddhist monk and Zen activist who was, during the time of the Vietnam War, he refused to take sides and he was advocating for peace. And because of that, his refusal to take sides, he was actually exiled from his country. He couldn't go back. And because of that, he set up a monastery called Plum Village in the south of France near Bordeaux, called Plum Village because they have lots of plum trees and these beautiful sunflower fields. It's just in the French rural countryside, so gorgeous. And he started his work of, number one, helping to save the boat people, all the refugees from Vietnam. Number two, really being in solidarity with a lot of peace movements throughout the world. He and Dr. Martin Luther King were good friends, which I think is relevant, seeing that Dr. Martin Luther King Day just passed. And they both advocated for each other's causes, which is really beautiful, this idea of beloved community that goes beyond our perceived differences. And then lastly, he went to work translating these rich tradition of Vietnamese Buddhism into a language that an 18-year-old from New York could both understand and get a lot of benefit from. So very, very, very grateful for teachers. And I want to tell you guys a little story that I think might be relevant. If I'm taking too much time, Renée, just cut me off whenever you feel.
You got another 5.
Excellent. This is a good 5-minute story. Thai, many people have this idea of him as like this very venerable monk, right? You know, he's written hundreds of books, I think, at this point. He did continue on 3 years ago, actually. His death anniversary was quite recent. But in that time, he left a huge mark on Buddhism and the nonviolence community. But he was also really, really playful. Like within him was this very cute, very naughty little boy, you know? And he used to love being part of the children's program. So at retreats in the Plum Village tradition, there's the program for adults, and then there's the children's program. And it can go from like toddler to 18, though I was the youngest adult. I just slid in there, but he used to do something in the children's program where he would give children kernels of corn, or 1 kernel each. And he'd give them a little homework assignment to plant these seeds, wait a couple weeks for them to grow into plants. And he would say, okay, now you have to sit down with them and you have to very eloquently explain to this corn plant that it used to be a corn kernel. And surely the corn will not believe you. What do you mean? The corn kernel and a piece of corn look very different. However, the child will know that, in fact, one led to the other. And Thai would say, you know, if you can really, really stick to it and explain to the corn that it used to be a seed, the corn will listen and understand. And then he would ask things like, where do you think the seed went? You know, now there's this thing that looks very different. Did the seed die? But if the seed died, then the corn plant could not be, right? And so in this way, he taught a very important point of Buddhism, which is not a eyes of signlessness, I think is the best translation. To have eyes of signlessness or signlessness, that's a hard word to say. You can understand that when you just see something or perceive, looks can be deceiving. You know, our perceptions can be very deceiving. I'm very glad I came in doing no homework on Thich Nhat Hanh or Plum Village, because I got to really see Thich Nhat Hanh and I got to feel and experience what it was like for him to walk in the room, because you could feel him before you could see him, that's for sure. And this is true with everything. You know, we suffer a lot as people, I think, because we're very attached to our signs. And they're often very binary, like birth and death, white and black, man and woman, all of these things. But in Buddhism, we teach that one of the doors of liberation is signlessness. So if we can understand that nothing begins or ends in reality, it's this wave, and one thing transforms into another thing, then we can understand the true nature of our reality, and we can save ourselves a lot of suffering. And I mean, of course, when things change, especially when we lose a teacher, or we don't lose a teacher, but the sign, the form of a teacher transforms into something else, it can be hard. But before his passing, Ty explained, I'm not going anywhere. Just like a cloud doesn't die, when it goes away, it rains, and that rain becomes water, and then we make that water into tea, as I have here, and then we drink that tea. That tea goes through us, comes back into the ocean, evaporates, and it's the cloud again. And so even though it doesn't look that way, we can understand and look with our Buddha eyes or our Bodhisattva eyes, and we can understand that it's still there. It's just the form has changed. And so in Buddhism, or Plum Village Buddhism, we say form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And science would agree that it's proven that we, though solid, are mostly empty. It's our atoms with wide swaths of emptiness. So I think that's a beautiful reminder that we can get stuck in these images of what we believe to perceive, which is actually a delusion. It's Maya, as we say in Sanskrit. It's entirely not separate. It interbees. And so, yeah, as we go through the discussion, I would love to invite people to talk about what that brings up in them, the idea of signlessness and the idea of seeing and perceiving versus actually looking deeply and seeing things for as they truly are. And with that, I'll bow out and pass it over to Renee. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you ever so much, Skylar. That was wonderful to hear about your personal experiences with Thich Nhat Hanh and Plum Village, and that little interlude with the children was so delightful to hear, and how he was helping them to see beyond the form of either the kernel or the sprout to something that was tying them together, sort of, but just this idea of the change, or so that the sign of the kernel or the sign of the sprout, even though those were not the same, there was some continuity there that one could perceive. Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. I'll open it to actually the whole circle for your observations on this theme for this week of the eyes to see. The eyes to see. Mary, I didn't have a chance to welcome you from California, where you are now, and you're in Central California, I suppose. And Alice, I'm not sure where you are right now, but you're so welcome, and we're glad to have Carolyn joining us from Santa Barbara, California.
Well, Skylar's dedication, and I just wanted to thank you for sharing. And it's such a I think it's really wonderful that you've started the first third of life meditation center and meditation focus. And as I drift to the last third, it's kind of interesting because I didn't conceive until you said that there are different ways of seeing. And you'll go back, one will go back and forth, but the dominant layer is almost, just a different part of the journey, and is distinct, and it's refreshing to see you do that. But I have one quick question. What did happen with your yellow tent? Did you take it elsewhere and keep studying, or? Did you realize the vision of the yellow tent as you brought it to Plum Village?
Yeah, thank you for that. I literally realized the vision. Like I stayed, so in Plum Village it's quite large and it's divided into 3 hamlets: Upper Hamlet, Lower Hamlet, and New Hamlet. New Hamlet was for youth, families, and couples. So I stayed there, and they do have kind of dorm style, but I just took my tent because it was cheaper and I was 18, so I didn't have a ton of money at the time. And yeah, I lived in it the whole time. And so we had many beautiful days where I would wake up with the sun streaming through that yellow tent. And I was like, oh, here it was. And I did absolutely achieve a level of peace that I had never experienced. I'll tell you, literally, my entire life, I believe that my shoulders were a good ½ inch higher than they actually are. So, like a week and a half into it, I felt like this drop and my shoulders had dropped for the first time. I was always kind of like this, I was always sort of prepared to go like that. And they relaxed. And let me tell you, you don't notice it until things change. And I was like, oh, I'm so relieved. It felt so much more physically sustaining and nourishing to not have my shoulders up like this. And yeah, I didn't do any yoga. I hadn't gone into any physical practices. I wasn't exactly a big fan of PE, but that was the first time where I was like, oh my God. And it really, really like drove home, the body and the mind are not separate. That is also another dichotomy that I can see through. There's interconnection there, of course. So yeah, I can't remember where that tent died or continued transformed, but I had it for a few more years, I'm sure. And it served me very well. I still have my camper backpack. I took this big giant backpack with me to France, and I still use it to this day. So that one continues to be in the form I got it in, give or take.
And if I understand, oh, go ahead, Michael. You have pictured behind you one of the places in Plum Village. Is that it, with the warm glow of the yellow robed monks?
I believe that's the main meditation hall there. But I want to salute Skylar for her courage in being willing to take on the challenge of speaking about Thich Nhat Hanh, who is such a remarkable person that it's just so difficult to try and capture him in a few minutes anyway. He was, of course, a Zen Buddhist teacher. He was a scholar. He knew many languages, fluent in many languages. He'd go back and forth between, Pali and Vietnamese and French, and just an excellent communicator. I mean, his gift was being able to bring Buddhist teachings so much into the present moment and make it so familiar to people, just spoke to them so easily. He was also an artist, a calligrapher. He was a poet. He did a lot of poetry. He was an activist, He was very involved in the whole Vietnam-American War. So he was just a remarkable figure. So I salute your courage in attempting to present him to us.
Is there anything that you could share with us, since you have also spent time with him, about his eyes?
Well, one of his main themes was coming back to our true home, which is the here and the now. There are many songs connected with Plum Village too. Skylar could probably sing a few songs for us about being in the here and now. But yeah, coming back to the present moment and wonderful moment. I'm ready to start singing the songs myself.
We absolutely can. If we have time at the end, I would love to. I have a lot of songs, and I've actually written a few Neo Plum Village songs for our Sangha, which is our group of practitioners. So yeah, I would love to share that. And I do ukulele accompaniment.
Why don't you go ahead, share one with us, that one of the originals with us, Skylar.
Okay, sure. And I tasked Z with sending the lyrics. So Z, can you give me a thumbs up if you're ready to send?
See, we'll have to make him a co-host.
Oh, whoopsies. Yep.
I have to add returns.
Oh, well, while he does that, I can say that this song is called Sea Change or Sea Change. I like puns and I like non-duality. So those things go together well. But this is a song that I wrote in the theme of playfulness of Plum Village, in that it's kind of a take on an older song, but I made it my own. And it's just about our ability to weather the weather of the ocean as we are on our little boats, you know, and take on the good days and the stormy days and everything in between, with really a stability of heart. And yeah, I can do the first part. I can sing it once by myself. Oh, hey, he's got it.
Sorry, make sure you have original sound for musicians on, so the ukulele sounds good.
Let me see if I know how to do that. Da, 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 da.
It's going to be on the right upper corner.
Not on mine because I'm on an iPad, but let me see. Well, hold on. Can you guys hear this?
Yes.
Then we're good.
Yeah.
All right. So this one is Sea Change. On the sea of despair, we all can. On the sea of despair, we all can float. Love and compassion can be our boat, and then as we row, we'll be happy and free as we float along till infinity. No coming, no going, no after or before. Within every closing is an open door. And though you continue so beautifully, we can still miss those so dear to you and me. Sea of despair, we all can float. Huh? Oh. Do we want to unmute and sing it together, or do we want to sing it muted? I don't know. What would be more fun?
Keep going. Keep going.
Okay.
Just finish it. Yeah, that would be great.
On the sea of despair, we all can float. Love and compassion will be our boat. And then as we row, we'll be happy and free as we float along till infinity.
Thank you so much. That compassion that you speak of reminds me of how I think of these Buddha eyes, and it really comes from my personal experience, from my teacher, and feeling whenever I walked into the room, into his presence, I felt this enormous flood of love embracing me. as if I was just being totally, completely seen. And so it's interesting when we talk about seeing, usually I think of seeing as something coming in. And yet there's this other sense as in which as we use our eyes, something can be going out. And so it feels like when somebody is looking out of their eyes with this love, with this compassion, what they're perceiving is always something wonderful. I felt like a wonderful being being perceived in that way by someone else. So I think that's an interesting thing about the eyes to see. Diana?
When I think of eyes to see, I'm aware form is emptiness, and emptiness is form, and we're all one. And the form that we see is the form that's taken out of emptiness or out of oneness. And what you just said, Renee, I think is important, because what we see is our perceived ideas and thoughts. To see reality is seeing it just as it is, but usually we see it through the lens of our past experiences, our wounded stories, our hope, and even if it's from love and compassion, those are the stories that we hold. We can all see something happen, and many people see it differently because of their own stories. So to be aware of, as we see, that we are all one, and these are just the forms which are empty, and what are the stories we're telling that's making me perceive the other person in a certain way, or the situation in a certain way. This person's bad, this person's good. Well, those are all perceived stories. They're just people, they're just forms. And so I think we need to have discriminatory wisdom about what choices we make, but realizing that everything we perceive is through the eyes of what we think. And that really creates what we see. And so I think that when we think of form as emptiness and emptiness as form, is to be able to step back and be in the here and the now and see it just as it is. And what does it mean to see without judgment? And we do need to make judgments. We need to make understanding of what we're seeing. And yet many times, if we can look and say, well, that is coming from a wounded story that I had, or I had an experience, and that's it. So I think being aware that our eyes see what our mind tells us. And so how can we really, and that's with mindfulness and meditation, that we step back and we move from our ego and see things as they are. So I think the eyes to perceive is really important, and realizing we see through our thoughts what our perceived stories are.
Yeah.
I want to thank Renee for sharing that story about her teacher. And yeah, it really, I want to drive home that Thich Nhat Hanh and his teachings helped me so much. But I really do believe that if I had gone to a Benedictine monastery or a Sufi school, or really, I don't think that it needed to be Buddhism. It just so happens I was directed towards that path, and it gave me a lot of healing, and so I stuck with it. But I think it could have been another tradition too. I think that many of these traditions, I think all of these traditions inter-are. They have a lot of wisdom to share. And what really helped me more than all the teachings, I believe, was just the level of feeling seen that I felt at Plum Village. That was my first experience with people really accepting me for who I was without wanting something or having some condition in return. And it was incredibly healing. Imagine, I didn't know anything about Buddhism except for the 2 days that I tried meditation for, maybe like a fourth of those 2 days. I was not dressed appropriately. You're not supposed to wear shorts and tank tops at a monastery. I was 18. That was a lot. I mean, I didn't have like a belly shirt, but I was pretty close to that. And I was not prepared, literally, like I didn't have cold weather clothes because I thought, oh, it's summer. But at night it was cold. And so, the second day I went up to one of the nuns and I was like, I'm cold. And she immediately got me one of the sisters' cardigans. Everybody wears brown, except on special occasions, as you can see in Michael's background, where they're wearing saffron. Their day-to-day is brown, because brown in Vietnamese is the color of the earth and the color of farmers. And so, yeah, you're not supposed to wear those unless you're ordained. But here you go. And throughout that, I was loved and seen just for who I was. Nobody needed anything from me. And it wasn't just me. People came, I'm from New York City, so I'm used to a diversity of people and languages, and that was by far the most diverse place I've ever lived, was Plum Village. People from all the corners of the world gathering together. And everyone, the space was held and created in a way that people felt so able to show themselves, to be vulnerable, and to be loved for who they were. And that was the first time I saw adults crying in public. And that was also so transformative. Growing up, I was taught that we don't do that, that is weak and unacceptable. And to see all these adults from all walks of life just weeping, happy and sad tears, I was transformed by that. And I don't think that could happen without a great deal of safety that was created, not just by Thich Nhat Hanh, but by all of the sisters and brothers and the lay practitioners, each other, and even though he's passed, I'm so happy that he continues in all of the monastics and all of his teachings and all of his books and in me, as I continue. So yeah, that is an important thing that every tradition should offer, is the ability to be seen and loved unconditionally.
Thank you. I feel as if that's what I receive whenever I'm around Diana, by the way. Michael?
Maybe Skylar would like to talk about hugging meditations.
Sure. There's a cute story for that one too. There's a lot of cute stories in Plum Village Buddhism. So the story goes that, and I actually have the book, I could go get it. In the book, they have these little pocket books, and one of them is how to love. There's how to eat, how to walk, how to love, how to fight. It's like a guidebook for being a human being in a way that isn't causing more suffering. But in How to Love, Thai talks about the story of moving to the West for the first time. And he's kind of a revolutionary in a way. He was a bit of a rebel, in Vietnamese Buddhist tradition, traditional Vietnamese Buddhism. You don't touch the monastics, that you don't do that. But he was in the West, and he was traveling. And one of the lay practitioners, who's a woman, was giving him a ride to the airport. And before he left, she said, "Is it okay if I hug you?" And he thought about it. And he said to himself, okay, I'm a Buddhist monk. I should have the spaciousness to be able to hug. So why not? When in Rome, right? And so he hugged this woman hugged him. And he says the experience was really stiff and awkward. And he realized that he didn't have the ability at that moment to hug mindfully. And so he developed the practice of hugging meditation, to mindfully hug. And the idea is you can mindfully do anything. You can mindfully work. You can mindfully take a shower and brush your teeth. And we have little gathas, which are poems for each of these things. You can wake up and go to sleep mindfully. And I guess the idea is to be mindful throughout your entire day, which is impossible unless you are enlightened. And even Thich Nhat Hanh would say, I'm a part-time Buddhist. or no, I'm a part-time Buddha, full-time Buddhist, part-time Buddha. Only when I'm really present in the moment am I Buddha, which just means the universal energy of life, enlightenment, not just a name for one guy. But in hugging meditation, basically you and the other person hug, you hold each other, and then you take 3 deep breaths in and out. That's very nice. Z and Ellis can attest. We practice hugging meditation in our wake up group, our youth group. Yeah, he has so many of those things. It really makes it accessible to practice because you can be mindful no matter what you're doing.
Michael.
I remember this one event. It was at the Mount Madonna Center in Watsonville, south of San Francisco. Couple hundred people in this room, and we all did hugging meditation, like this room full of people. You know, you would first get permission, you know, you would bow, but then people just holding on to and hugging each other. And it wasn't just for 3 breaths. It went on and on. And you talk about tears, there were plenty of tears. It was really wonderful.
And I'm kind of imagining the look that was in those eyes must have really been divine. Yeah. Such a softening, I imagine. And the, you know, is there something very special about tears in situations like that? Yeah, the tears themselves, I think, are sacred.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing that story. You know, I love to hear other people's experience of the teachings. And obviously, Thich Nhat Hanh was very prolific. So I'm wondering if anybody else has anything to share about our teacher or the practice or anything related to Plum Village. I'm really curious about your experiences.
And the eyes.
And the eyes.
Bob, you're in a little bit different tradition, but I'm sure you can share.
Yes, am I unmuted?
You are.
Okay. No, I was just we were talking about hugging meditation, and when I read that reference to hugging meditation, I remember a story that one person went, and when he got home, he hugged his mother, and it was so profound that she went to Plum Village to practice. So, I like that. Yeah, I think when I think of the eye seeing, and as you said, you know, seeing out to what is there, or seeing in, the one thing that you can't do is see your own eye. And to me, that indicates there's a fundamental mystery to this. Both you and Skylar were talking about love and compassion. There are 4 immeasurable minds that Buddhism talks about, and Thich Nhat Hanh talked about them. And love and compassion are 2 of them. And the other 2 are joy and equanimity. And I think they all fundamentally have that sense of the profound mystery of seeing, the mystery of love, the mystery of equanimity. Confucius once said that knowing you don't know is the beginning of knowing. I think that sense of just accepting the mystery of these immeasurable powers that we have. So that's what came up for me when Skylar was talking.
Mary Bird, you've spent time, I know, in many Christian Catholic retreats. Do you have anything similar to share along these lines, and maybe something about the eyes to see?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Skylar. there are so many parallels, and I think this is true for all of the major and minor religions, because we're here to help each other. We're here to love one another. And yeah, hugging is very important at the retreats that I participate in. But it's also something that people aren't sure about doing. You know, you have to kind of sense them out. You have to, not everybody, they stand back. They don't want to be touched. And usually by the end of the weekend, they're much, they've thawed out, and they're much more open to it. And a lot of times at the end of the retreats, we ask the participants, what were their closest moments? What touched their hearts? And a lot of times it'll be the hugs. They didn't expect that. They expected to hear about religion, and the hugs are very important. And we have to respect people too, because not everybody likes to be touched. They've had traumas in their lives, and that could bring back some very uncomfortable remembrances, memories, and basically we try to just love on people and give them space. You give them an idea, and then let them sit with it. They have to see how it affects them, and whatever outcome, a lot of times people come back and they want to be a part of the experience, and that's a wonderful thing. And so yes, thank you, Skylar. Amen.
And Mary, especially for those who can't accept an actual hug, I imagine you can still give them a hug through the eyes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I feel those from you all the time.
Just give them a hand, a little squeeze, or thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Mary Ubersax.
You better call me Mariange.
Yeah, Mariange. It's just
I don't want to get confused.
that way. Yeah.
Seeing just immediately brings me back to Carlos Castaneda's work in seeing. And so the idea is the true self eventually comes to bear if you start seeing, and you meet these allies or obstacles or sufferings in the tradition that he carried on from northern Mexico shamanism. But what I believe is that compassion was allowed him, he had to go through all the physical changes, and he was always hit in the chest by the energies. And then as he attuned to love and compassion, his allies, then he began to see. So I just was using that word to go back to when I was 16, 18 years old, and just kind of discovering that other path and that other awareness. And you see, feel, sense with your whole body was one of the concepts that I think that we tend to learn throughout our lives. And so the hugging kind of brings in that, what are we experiencing through our body as we hug, and how does it create that love and compassion, the process of being able to be engulfed with it, to be seen with it, and to be able to generate that part of ourselves, which is the wanting or the interness that Tay then, continues to have taught us, and we expand. So it's interesting to bring in yet another tradition and study on it.
Thank you. I think another practice that I really love is looking deeply. Looking deeply is a Plum Village practice. And it kind of starts with the koan, or like Buddhist riddle of, are you sure? Are you sure? And we're taught to ask that whenever we have a strong image or a dogma about something. The question to keep in mind is, are you sure? And that's not to like throw doubt or to make people feel insecure. I think it's to remind us to slow down, because we in sight we can see so quickly, you know, constantly like rods and cones are taking in all of this stuff around us, and because we're humans and our brains have these convenient bookmarks, like platonic forms of things, we tend to see what we expect to see, and we see an image of something rather than what is actually there. So we look deeply, and we have a practice of meditating on objects. And so in the example I gave with the seed and the kernel, or the kernel and the plant, the object of meditation would be that plant, you know. And I think if you look deeply at anything, these static ideas of what we think it is start to unravel. You know, at the very, like, when I think about a corn plant, it's like, okay, like big bright green, yellow, you know, like the toddler's version, big circle corn, but like actual corn doesn't look anything like that. And if we actually look at the plant, if I actually look at the plant, there's so many colors, there's so much nuance. It's not just the shape that I expect it to be. And then if I look even deeper, if I take more time, I start to see the kernel in the corn plant, and I start to see the compost in the corn plant too. I can see the whole cycle, and I can see like the non-birth, non-death aspect of it too. And I've definitely been practicing that a lot recently. You know, we had an election, obviously. It's so easy these days, I feel, for people to be really caught in binary thinking, and not see the interrelatedness of stuff, you know. And so we make these caricatures, and either side has this really straw man caricature of the other side, when, you know, in reality this doesn't exist. Like there's seeds of democracy in Republicans, and there's seeds of republicanism in Democrats, and really we're mostly the same on most things, but it's so easy to give into that image, which is usually blown way out of proportion, not realistic to what's really there, and get scared to get activated. And there are certain powers that be that quite benefit from that. You know, they don't want people to look deeply. They would like people to make a lot of split-second judgments based on activated emotionality. I certainly see that in my life, you know, in people of all ages. So I hope we can all take the time to slow down and look deeply at things, and really see, versus just having assumptions about what we're perceiving.
That really helps. Yeah, thank you.
One thing that Thich Nhat Hanh talked about, and it's what you just talked about of looking deeply, it reminds me of it. And it was a practice of touching the earth. And he would bow deeply and touch the earth. And again, touch the earth like was described as hugging meditation, really go into that. And then he had thoughts that would go along with that. So the first thought was to think of all of your ancestors, your parents, your grandparents, and all of your physical ancestors. And then you get up again, and then you bow again, and then you think of all of your spiritual ancestors, your immediate teacher, as Renee was talking about, but then your teacher's teacher, and going back to, in Buddhism, the ancestors, the bodhisattvas, the Buddhas, and finally all of that energy that creates your spiritual. And then you bow again, and you bow out to all of the different forms of life in this earth. And it's looking deeply, but it's also looking connectively, you know, as opposed to, as Schuyler said, dualistically or binary. And I just loved he has what is called the four prostrations and the four touchings of the earth. And so he really loved that sense of humility and making it so that you were hugging the earth such that there's almost no distinction between you and the earth and those thought processes.
Michael.
Of course, he would always say, walking meditation was another main practice. And, your feet should be kissing the earth with each step. Perhaps I could read one of his poems.
Oh, that would be a wonderful way for us to end.
I just happen to have one here. It's called Going in Circles. Oh, you who are going in circles, please stop. What are you doing it for? I cannot be without going because I don't know where to go. That's why I go in circles. Oh, you who are going in circles, please stop. But if I stop going, I will stop being. Oh, my friend who is going in circles, you are not one with this crazy business of going in circles. You may enjoy going, but not going in circles. Where can I go? Go where you can find your beloved, where you can find yourself. And if I may also share, I'm putting in chat a link. If you would like to spend a little more time with Thich Nhat Hanh, there is a film that has come out, a short film. It's half an hour long, a documentary. It's called A Cloud Never Dies. And it's the story of his life. And it's available to watch on YouTube if you'd like to watch it.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Michael. Well, I'd like to tell you about our presentation and theme for next week while somebody gets brave enough to consider giving a vote of thanks to Skylar for her presentation today. The theme for next week will be body and soul. The quote for the week is from Five Rhythms dance creator Gabrielle Roth. The body is a Zen dojo, a sacred space for spiritual investigation. Oh, Bob needs that one again. Okay. The body is a Zen dojo, a sacred space for spiritual investigation for the week of body and soul. So I think it'll be a good follow-up to this this theme of the eyes to see. And Margaret, I think I saw your hand up.
I would like to thank Skylar.
Wonderful.
Skylar, that was really wonderful stories, and it brings to mind, I think, probably each of us have moments where we felt kind of lost, and then we felt seen, heard better, and you presented that really, really well, and I thank you. Thanks.
You did indeed, Skylar. Thank you so much. Thank you for your bravery and singing and accompanying your own singing on the ukulele. I forgot to tell you that the person who will be presenting for next week for Body and Soul is going to do it from the musical tradition. And that will be our general manager and songster, Dustin Hara, who's going to present on Body and Soul next week. And each of you is so very warmly welcome. I imagine that Skylar is willing to stay for a couple minutes if anybody wants to stay on. And we thank you all again. See you next week. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you. Thank you, Skylar.
Aloha. Thank you.
Aloha.
Bye, Mary.
Aloha. Thank you, Skylar. It was really interesting.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, nice to have you, Kim.
Nice to see everybody.